have coming up the following day an event that is bizarre, let us say, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. As I mentioned earlier, what we've got going on is the certification by the Congress of the Electoral College vote, which was cast and tabulated on the 14th of December. And this will come before the Congress on the 6th. Typically, this confirmation proceeding is a rubber stamp kind of affair. And it's simply, okay, the Electoral College has done this, we read out the votes, and that makes it official, and it gets kind of unanimous approval, and then it moves on to certify the candidate for Inauguration Day 2 weeks later. However, built into this process is the ability to object to the counting of the votes. The process is this, that the individual states in their meetings of the electors in the Electoral College cast the votes, they're tallied up, and the authorized official certified tally is sent by the state governors to the Congress. The chairman of the Senate, the president of the Senate, who, as we mentioned a moment ago, happens to be the sitting vice president, in this case Mike Pence, is then called upon to preside, and his job is to open up the envelopes, and the results are read out to the combined meeting of the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's all a unified meeting. As the votes as the tallies are read out, they're recorded by the clerk, and Pence doesn't have to actually add them himself. The clerk takes care of all the math, and we know that Joe Biden got 306 Electoral College votes. There's also provision that allows for a challenge of the votes as they're announced by the vice president or the president of the Senate. And so a challenge can be mounted by any seated member of Congress or the Senate, and they can object. I think that's not a fair rendering, or it's not accurate, or whatever the objection may be. Originally, this was put into law about 150 years ago in the 1880s to allow for situations in which there was a contested election within a state in voting for president. So that if, for example, the Republican candidate won the popular vote and the electors are turned over to that, there might be a Democratic slate of candidates for the College of Electors, and they claim to have the real authority there. So if the state can't figure it out and the governor cannot certify the vote count in terms of the Electoral College votes before turning it over to the Senate, either fails to meet the deadline or sends in an envelope that's empty or a statement saying we can't figure it out, whatever it is, then that is cause for an interruption of the process and of certification by the Congress. And in that case, then it would make sense to examine this. In this particular case, however, all 50 states have had votes counted from the Electoral College. All have been certified by the governors, so it's not a question of something being inaccurate being sent to the chamber there that will be presided over on the 6th of January by Mike Pence. But what can happen, though, is any member of Congress, for example, can say, hey, I object to that. And if a member of Congress, a member of the House, objects, then it can easily be overruled by the presiding officer, in this case, Mike Pence. However, if a member of the Senate also objects, then that creates a situation in which the law states that the combined chambers break up into their separate categories. The House members go back to the House of Representatives, and the Senate go into the Senate chambers, and they hold separate debates on the outcome of the election. And the debate is basically, do we accept the vote of the College of Electoral College or not? And is those numbers valid? Well, when this goes to the House of Representatives with a Democratic majority in the House, what's likely to happen there is the Democrats will vote to accept the decision of the Electoral College. Pretty much a rubber stamp kind of thing. There's very little doubt about that. In the Senate, Even though there may be some senators objecting to the vote, we already have, almost an even split there, not quite, a slight majority for the Republicans, but already a substantial number of Republicans have acknowledged Biden's victory in the election, and essentially it is, kind of a moot point. We would expect that to pass without much effort in the Senate as well to certify the Electoral College vote as it now stands. Now, we'd expect that to pass, but not without considerable debate, hostility, and potential embarrassment along the way. And that's what we're looking at as we examine the chart. Now, this whole proceeding is scheduled or set to begin at 1 p.m. on the 6th of January. And as we look at the chart for this event, we can see a lot of different things going on with it here that are very interesting in terms of the planetary configurations, and definitely some indications of potential for hostility and challenge and what have you, kind of wired into the mix there. However, what we do have is something quite striking, which is Mercury conjunct the midheaven in this chart. The midheaven at 1 p.m. that day will be at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Mercury will be at 27 degrees of Capricorn. So this is highly descriptive of the event itself. In other words, the nature of this event is thought process, decision-making process. It's a Mercury kind of thing. And so we have an event in which we have discussion going on and decisions being made, and Mercury is right on the midheaven, totally apropos for this kind of context here. However, let's take a look at this with the horoscope for that event at 1 p.m. on the 6th of January. And in this case, we're not putting our pointer on the midheaven from the previous day's poll closing. Instead, we're going to point it right at Mercury, because that is obviously the critical factor in this whole configuration here. And so what we get here are three key activations that we want to be aware of in this chart. The first one is Zeus Volcanus midpoint. And Zeus Volcanus, Zeus is energy, and Volcanus is force, I guess is one way of putting it there. So we have a tremendous, powerful expression of energy. Huge efforts are going into disrupting this event. And oftentimes when major wars break out, there's a significant Zeus Volcanus combination involved. And so we could say this is a great war. It's a mighty confrontation. It's very, very powerful. Nothing to be ignored at all. This is destined to be an event of major significance just in terms of the conflict involved. Then we also have the Mars-Pluto midpoint indicated. And this can event, Mars is taking action, Pluto is making change, and this is typically about cell division or things splitting apart. We divide and reproduce by division kind of thing, a breaking off process. And to me, what's interesting here is that midpoint Mars-Pluto that says splitting apart and dividing is exactly descriptive of what happens in the congressional chambers if they have objections from both the House and the Senate. They're required then to adjourn and split apart, so the House meets separately from the Senate. They each have debates, they each have votes, and then they get back together to report their results. Then finally, a very, very interesting midpoint gets triggered that I personally think is descriptive of the whole mess, which is the Hades Poseidon midpoint. This is about a state of mental deficiency, mental defects, to deal with people who are incapable of logic or reason. And that seems to be the order of the day here with the hullabaloo that's likely to take place in the halls of Congress that particular day. Because by any reasonable assessment, the election has already been won. Now, the notion here is connected with the idea that somehow the whole process can be upended at this late stage, and that Donald Trump will magically be declared the winner of the election and serve a second term immediately. And as far as I can tell, that's extraordinarily unlikely. I do not see it supported astrologically, but I do see a huge level of disruption. Now, we mention all of this in the context of what happens in the chambers of the Senate and the House there, but it's also likely to be happening in the streets. And in fact, there's been considerable provocation and urging of people to come demonstrate in the streets of Washington, D.C. The same chart, 1 p.m. on the 6th of January is set for Washington. So all this applies to the city as a whole and emblematically the country as a whole for that particular time frame as well. So we're likely to see, hopefully not an outbreak of literal violence and a great war beginning, but it has that kind of potential here that's built into the event. So based on what we're seeing here is that inability to deal with reason. This is the biggest obstacle that I'm seeing in the whole mix. The fact that it, even if it doesn't make sense to protest something which is a foregone conclusion, it's going to happen anyway. And so we kind of have to deal with that. My take on the situation is that calmer heads will prevail, that the decision will be made, but that we can expect to have a long day and perhaps well into the night, and who knows, maybe it gets adjourned and carried over to the next day before the actual decision is made to certify the vote, because of the potential for extended debate and potential for external influences in the streets as well coming into play here. So with all that in mind, then, what we're looking at is an event that could be potentially quite disruptive along the way. And the other factor that I mentioned tangentially is that it's what it will do, in fact, is in the Senate, if there is that split in the debate in the Senate, then it will call on every senator to take a individualized vote in favor of upholding the Constitution and approving the decision of the College of Electors, or take a vote that shows loyalty for the current president, regardless of the legal implications of that. So it's, that could prove to be interesting, to say the least, and potentially embarrassing for individuals.